A man in his late 70s sat across from me, his shoulders slumped. He wasn't complaining of pain or a specific illness. He just looked defeated. He finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Doc, I feel like I've lost a part of myself, like I'm fading away." He described a quiet struggle, something he'd never felt comfortable talking about, even to his closest friends. And he's far from the only one. "I'm Dr. Benjamin Carter. For over 20 years, I've been a urologist and a men's health specialist, focusing on the unique challenges men face as they get older. I've sat with countless men like him, men grappling with changes they weren't prepared for, often in silence. We need to talk about things that might feel private, even a little awkward, because ignoring them can take a real toll on your health, your spirit, and your sense of who you are. Today, I want to share some truths about a very personal topic that most older men never hear, things that can quietly impact your body, your mind, and your connection to yourself. These aren't just medical facts, they're insights learned from decades of listening to men just like you, and understanding them could help you reclaim vitality and peace of mind you might think are gone forever. This conversation is long overdue, but it's absolutely not too late to make a difference. Let's start with the first truth, one that trips up so many men as they age. Truth number 1. Your erection isn't the only measure of your manhood, and that's perfectly normal. I remember a gentleman, about 70 years old, who came to me visibly upset. "It's just not the same, doctor," he said, his voice thick with frustration. "Does this mean I'm finished?" My heart ached for him because that fear, that question, echoes in my office almost daily. Men notice things changing, maybe not as firm, not as quick, not as reliable as they once were. And too many jump to the painful conclusion that their sexual life, their very masculinity, is over. But here's the reality I wish every man over 60 understood earlier. Your body is simply shifting gears. Blood flow isn't quite as vigorous, hormones ebb and flow differently, and nerve signals take a little more time. This isn't a failure, it's just the natural progression of aging. What used to be automatic now requires a touch more patience, a bit more focus. But this absolutely does not mean your capacity for pleasure, for intimacy, for feeling alive is gone. We grew up in a world that hammered home the idea that being a man meant always being ready, always performing. There wasn't much room for vulnerability or acknowledging that things change. Nobody sat us down and said, "Hey, feeling good still matters. Connection still matters. And you don't need a rock-hard erection to experience either." I've seen men spend years feeling inadequate, believing they were broken, when all they needed was a new perspective on their own evolving body. They didn't realize that the feeling of release, the sense of connection, is separate from achieving maximum rigidity. You can still experience deep satisfaction, emotional closeness, and physical comfort without the full response you had decades ago. But because this isn't talked about, so many men suffer in silence, convinced they've lost something that has only transformed. What truly matters now isn't chasing past performance, but being present in the moment. It's not about pressure, it's about giving yourself permission to explore what feels good now. When you let go of how things used to be and open up to how they are, you unlock a different kind of intimacy, one built on kindness to yourself, curiosity, and respect for your body's journey. This first truth is foundational. I've witnessed men's lives brighten when they finally grasp that they are still complete, still valuable, and still capable of experiencing pleasure, even if the path looks different than it did in their youth. And speaking of things most men were never told, let's explore the second truth, one that goes beyond the purely physical. What if I told you that this private act isn't just about the body, but deeply connected to your feelings, your memories, and how you stay grounded within yourself? What you're about to hear might completely change your understanding of it. Truth number 2, masturbation isn't just physical, it's tied to your emotions and your nervous system. Not long ago, I had a conversation with a gentleman, a retired teacher in his early 70s. He wasn't there for a physical problem. He came in because, as he put it, "I just feel empty, doctor. Like the volume has been turned down on everything." At first, he thought it was just the blues, but the more we talked, the clearer it became. His private habits weren't driven by desire. They were a way he was trying to cope. He hadn't even realized that touching himself had become his quiet, almost unconscious method for dealing with stress, difficulty sleeping, and the ache of loneliness. That conversation opened his eyes, and mine too, to something vital. This is a truth I wish more older men understood sooner. Engaging in this act in your 60s and beyond isn't solely about physical release. It's deeply linked to your brain, your feelings, your entire nervous system. After orgasm, your body naturally releases potent chemicals, things like dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. These are your body's built-in regulators for mood, sleep, and feeling calm. For many men, especially those living alone or navigating loss, this simple act can become a quiet lifeline, a way to find a moment of peace, a sense of control, or even just a brief escape. But when it's done without any awareness, it can slowly become something hollow, a ritual without meaning. That's what happened to my patient. The habit remained, but the feeling faded. We were taught from a young age to be tough, to bottle things up, to believe that showing emotion was a sign of weakness. So, when the only time you truly allow yourself to let go is in private, during a moment of self-touch, that act takes on a much deeper significance. It becomes more than physical. It becomes a form of quiet self-soothing, sometimes even survival. Yet, most men never see it this way. They think they're just holding onto an old habit. They don't realize their bodies are still reaching for comfort, for peace, not just physical pleasure. The real pitfall isn't the act itself. It's doing it mindlessly, using it solely as a way to kill time or outrun a feeling you haven't acknowledged. If you're turning to it just to numb out or escape, you might slowly lose the ability to connect with yourself on a deeper level. But when you approach it with intention, with presence, it can transform into something healing, an act of emotional clarity and neurological well-being. And yes, at your age, that connection between body and mind matters more than ever. If that truth felt surprising, the next one might feel even more urgent. Because what if I told you that not touching yourself at all, letting that part of you go completely dormant, might be causing more harm than good? What you're about to hear could explain physical changes you might be experiencing that no one ever warned you about. Truth number 3, the use it or lose it principle is absolutely real and often misunderstood. I clearly remember a patient named George. He was 72, a widower, and had recently started seeing someone new after years on his own. When he came to see me, he wasn't excited. He was filled with anxiety. "I finally met a wonderful woman," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "but my body, it just doesn't seem to work anymore." You could hear the heartbreak. He thought something was fundamentally broken, that it was simply too late. But what he didn't realize, and what so many older men never hear, is that it wasn't dysfunction in the way he thought. It was disuse. This is a truth I wish every man over 60 could grasp sooner. Your sexual function isn't just tied to the number of years you've lived. It's deeply connected to whether you keep those systems active. Just like your muscles lose strength and mass if you don't use them, the delicate tissues and blood vessels in your penis respond to stimulation. When there's no activity over a long period, they can slowly start to become less flexible, less responsive. Nerve endings can become less sensitive. Blood flow can become sluggish. And tragically, no one ever tells you this is happening until you notice the changes yourself. And often, by then, you feel like it's irreversible. George hadn't touched himself in years. Not because he didn't have any desire left, but because he thought it no longer mattered or was even appropriate after his wife passed. Life had quieted that part of him, and he'd let it go, assuming it was just part of getting old. But internally, his body had been quietly adapting to that lack of use, slowly closing down pathways that could have stayed open with just a little regular attention. The good news. For George, it wasn't too late. With gentle, consistent stimulation, no pressure, just presence and patience, he slowly began to feel things again. It wasn't like flipping a switch, but gradually, his body started to remember. And with that physical awakening, a significant piece of his confidence and sense of self came back to life. So many older men mistakenly believe that unless they have a partner, maintaining their sexual health isn't important. That belief isn't just wrong, it can be genuinely harmful. Masturbation at this stage of life isn't just about seeking pleasure. It's about keeping your physical systems engaged, your tissues healthy, and reminding your body of a simple but powerful truth. You still matter, and your body is still capable of responding if you give it the chance. But if not using this part of you can create silent damage, what about the opposite? What if the way you are staying sexually active is actually changing your brain in ways that hurt you? In the next truth, I'll reveal something that has become incredibly common, almost invisible, in the lives of older men. Yet it may be quietly dulling your senses, lowering your natural drive, and changing how you feel about real intimacy. You absolutely need to hear this. Truth number 4. Relying heavily on pornography may be subtly changing your brain and dulling your sensitivity. One evening, I was talking with a patient, a gentleman named Robert, a widower in his late 60s. He was struggling with a profound sense of disconnection, not just physically, but emotionally. He told me something I hear far too often from men his age. "I still touch myself, doctor, but it feels empty, like nothing really gets through anymore." At first, he thought it was just part of aging, but as we explored it further, a painful pattern emerged. His nightly routine of watching pornography, something he'd turned to for comfort and stimulation after his wife passed, had quietly begun to rob him of his ability to feel deeply, both alone and potentially with another person. This is a truth I wish so many older men knew sooner. As your brain ages, it's still adaptable, but perhaps less flexible than it was in youth. And if you've been using pornography as your primary source of stimulation for a long time, your brain may have gradually adapted to that intense, fast-paced input. It gets used to the extreme visuals, the constant novelty, the instant reward. Over time, this can subtly rewire your system. The flood of dopamine triggered by porn can make everyday stimuli like the touch of a real hand, or even your own gentle touch, feel less exciting, less potent, simply not enough to capture your attention or evoke a strong response. What makes this particularly concerning for older men is how gradually it happens. You don't notice it at first. It feels like a harmless habit, a way to pass the time or find some release. But slowly, over months or years, you might find that the images on a screen excite you more than the possibility of real connection. Your imagination might feel less vibrant. Your body might feel numb, even though your mind still wants to feel something. Robert described it like trying to enjoy a quiet walk in nature after spending hours in a loud, flashing arcade. The real world just feels muted. We worked together to help him gradually reduce his reliance on pornography, not with judgment, but with patience and understanding. And what happened next was remarkable. Within a few weeks, he started to feel sensations again. His body felt more alive. His own touch felt more meaningful. All because he stepped away from the screen and began reconnecting with his own physical self, his breath, and his inner landscape. I only wish he had started this process earlier. It could have saved him years of feeling disconnected and numb. And now we arrive at the final truth, one that weaves all the others together. Because after all the silence, the potential shame, and the confusion that often surround this topic, there's something powerful that older men absolutely deserve to know. Something that could fundamentally change how you view yourself and your health from this point forward. Truth number 5. Done with awareness, masturbation can be a source of self-care and connection, not something to hide. A gentleman named Arthur once sat across from me during a routine checkup. He was 78, a quiet, thoughtful man. Towards the end of the visit, he hesitated, looking down, then asked, "Doctor, is it still all right to touch myself at my age?" That question stopped me. Not because it was unusual, I hear variations of it all the time, but because of the quiet embarrassment in his voice, like he was confessing something wrong. But what Arthur didn't realize, and what I wish every older man knew deep down, is this. This act isn't something to feel ashamed of or hide from. At your age, done with intention and presence, it might be one of the most important forms of self-care you can practice. The simple truth is, engaging in this act mindfully can support more than just physical release. It helps maintain healthy blood flow to your pelvic tissues, keeping them more responsive. It can assist prostate health by helping to clear out fluids. It's a natural way to ease anxiety, lift your mood, and improve sleep quality through the release of those calming brain chemicals we talked about. But beyond the biology, it does something even more crucial. It helps you stay connected to a fundamental part of yourself, the part that still feels desire, that holds your identity as a man, that still wants to feel alive and present in your own body. When Arthur's wife passed away, he stopped everything that felt remotely connected to intimacy. He genuinely believed that chapter of his life was closed forever. For nearly 7 years, he hadn't allowed himself a single moment of physical pleasure or self-exploration. "I thought it was inappropriate," he admitted, his voice still laced with that old shame. "I didn't think I was allowed to still be that kind of man." That sentence has stayed with me because I've heard its painful echo in so many other men. We live in a culture that often subtly teaches older men to retreat, to shrink, to stop feeling those parts of themselves. But that's a cruel myth. Desire doesn't vanish. It simply changes form, becoming quieter, perhaps less urgent, but it's still there. And if you don't listen to it, if you suppress it completely, it can turn into a profound sense of disconnection and loneliness. When Arthur finally began to reconnect with himself, gently, without pressure or expectation, his mood noticeably improved. He started sleeping better. He smiled more readily. He wasn't trying to rewind the clock or chase youth. He was reclaiming a piece of his dignity, his self-worth, his right to feel pleasure and presence in his own body. That's what mindful self-touch can become in later life. Not an escape, but a return to yourself. A quiet declaration that says, "I am still here. I still matter." So you've heard 5 truths that many older men wish they'd understood sooner. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Thank you for having the courage to lean into a topic that most men your age were never given permission to discuss openly. That willingness alone shows a rare kind of strength, one that comes not from denial, but from seeking understanding. These 5 truths aren't just medical facts. They are hard-won insights shaped by the real experiences, the quiet regrets, and the powerful awakenings of men who wished someone had told them sooner. We started by dismantling the myth that your erection defines your manhood, showing that pleasure and connection are still vibrant possibilities, even as your body changes. We explored how this private act isn't just physical, but deeply emotional, neurological, a fundamental human way of connecting with yourself. You saw how neglecting this part of your body isn't harmless. It can cause your physical systems to slowly lose function, but also how gentle attention can help them remember. We talked about the hidden cost of relying on pornography, how it can subtly change your brain and dull your capacity for real-world sensation and intimacy. And finally, we arrived at the truth most men never hear, that mindful self-touch, especially as you age, isn't a source of shame. It can be a powerful form of self-care, a lifeline that helps you stay connected to your identity, your body, and your sense of being fully alive. I've met countless men in their 60s, 70s, even 80s who told me, "I thought that part of my life was over." They believed they had nothing left to feel, nothing left to give in that realm. But what I've learned over decades is that desire doesn't retire. It softens, it shifts, it changes its rhythm, but it never truly disappears. And when you learn to meet your body where it is now, not where it used to be, you discover something incredibly powerful. You are still a man, you are still whole, and you are still deserving of feeling good in your own skin. So, wherever you are on your journey, single or partnered, currently active or contemplating starting again, I truly hope these 5 truths help you reclaim something that was never lost, only perhaps waiting to be rediscovered. Your age doesn't disqualify you from feeling, from touching, from healing. In fact, understanding these things now might be exactly what you need to step into a more vibrant, connected future.